And so in part, what I'm doing is trying to manage and manipulate people's perceptions of me, how they see me and view me and interact with me, so that I can avoid taking a hit to my self-esteem. I'm actually making my shit someone else's. I'm projecting onto them. Here's how you need to see and interact with me. And that shit ain't nice. And of course, that's got a lot of depth, a lot of roots. But in essence, if I don't deal with my shit, I make it someone else's. You're listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and the aim of this podcast is pretty simple: to support you in building rock-solid foundations, legendary integrity, and kick-ass relationships with plenty of stories, a load of lessons, and a solid dose of some loving straight talk. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Legends podcast. This is what I'm going to call a little mic drop moment. It's a short, punchy one, and I'm here to deliver this. I, for the longest time, have been asked the question, what do I do? I'm a men's coach, a man coach. What do you do? And, is it a life coach for men? And yes and no. Here is the simplicity of how I can sum it up, and then there's more to it. I support everyday men in getting their shit together so they can get more from life, love, and the everyday. If we break that down a little bit, getting your shit together is not some final point at where, I'm perfect. But it is actually dealing with the shit that I haven't dealt with. The shit that I still carry around from my past. All the shit from my childhood that I picked up along the way, and that does not only include people who had objectively really traumatic and shitty upbringings. Any of the stuff that I experienced that led me to form beliefs about myself and the world around me that no longer serve me, that form behaviors that no longer serve me, which is a massive range. Any of the unmet needs that I had that I have then countered to try and meet those needs ineffectively, which a lot of guys struggle with the idea of. I had a great upbringing. Guess what? I had an amazing upbringing and I had unmet needs. It's just natural. Here's a piece that is becoming more and more true from my own experience, both individually, personally, and as a father. Two people alone cannot meet the needs of a child. We have this idea of it takes a village. It's a nice idea that we cling to, but not really at all. It's true. And so there's going to be unmet needs. Part of my unmet needs growing up was the need for stability. Even though it was there, it wasn't there in a form. We moved around a lot when I was a kid. And so things would have been, I was a safe kid. I learned that from my parents: stay stable, safe, secure. And so moving around and being a new kid time and time and time again was incredibly unsettling for me. It was challenging. And so it created this gap, this unmet need of stability, of consistency. And so what did I do? I doubled down as a behavior on being incredibly stable and incredibly consistent. And whilst they served me massively until I brought awareness to them, they didn't in many ways. It created behaviors, fear of change and new things, and quote, instability and uncertainty, and a real anchored behavior of stubbornness. A huge behavior of being a stubborn piece of shit, really, to a point that I've talked about in this podcast and many pieces of content in the past, where I can see how stubborn I was, that I would argue with things just for the sake of it, even given evidence to the contrary. No, you can't change my mind. No better example to give a really quick story that I have shared, but I'll bring it to the context of this conversation, of onions. I was a very fussy eater as a kid and growing up, and a lot of things I didn't eat because I just plain refused to eat them. I decided that I didn't like them, and you could not fucking change my mind. Nothing more than onions. It was at the top of the hierarchy. I spent my lifetime pulling onions out of things, arguing with my mother not to put the onions in things. I remember about lasagna. Don't put the onions in lasagna. You can't taste them even if they're in there, which of course missed my entire point. Well, then if you couldn't taste them, what's the matter in putting them in there? Well, I'll tell you one reason was because that kind of pseudo crunch is how I used to refer to it, that onions had. And then I was in a relationship. I was engaged to be married, and it became a really interesting conversation with my ex-fiance. She loved this idea of onions, and she was curious about it, and she used to talk about it. What about this? What about this? What about these caramelized onion tarts that I make? And I'm like, no. To the point where she said, you know what? I'm gonna start pureeing up onions and put them in your food, because then you'll never know, and then you might even start liking onions. And I said to her, do you know what? If one day I realized or decided that I liked onions, I'd never admit it. I'd never admit it. I'm too committed to it. And I was fortunate in that moment to have an element of self-awareness, to connect to, holy shit, is that really how I am? Am I that incredibly stubborn and pig-headed and immovable and obstinate that even if I realized I like something, I would cut myself short, right? I would cut off my nose to spite my face, as the saying goes. I would starve myself of that thing so that I didn't have to admit it externally and be wrong. Woo! And so onions, but it's a great example of how our unprocessed shit can go out into the world and cause shit for ourselves and others. And so this is my plea, my invitation for you today. As men, if we don't turn, face, own, deal with, heal, move through, integrate our shit, we make it someone else's. And that causes all sorts of shit. And we might think, no, I don't. I've got unprocessed shit, and so I'm extremely nice and extremely considerate to other people, maybe to the detriment of yourself. And anything that is heavily to the detriment of yourself is also to the detriment of those people around you, those people you care about. You might be a yes man, a nice guy. And we know, and go listen to my podcast and all my content on this, I got plenty more to come, that nice guys by default are being nice so that we can be liked and avoid rejection. And I say we because I'm always a recovering nice guy. And so in part, what I'm doing is trying to manage and manipulate people's perceptions of me, how they see me and view me and interact with me, so that I can avoid taking a hit to my self-esteem. I'm actually making my shit someone else's. I'm projecting onto them. Here's how you need to see and interact with me. And that shit ain't nice. And of course, that's got a lot of depth, a lot of roots. But in essence, if I don't deal with my shit, I make it someone else's on some level. And I do remember when I was starting to come out of, so the earlier relationship about the onions, that ended. I had my heart pulled out of my chest and fucking elbow dropped on the ground in front of me. I had my heart broken, and it was a terrifying and shitty and just helpless and uncomfortable, awful experience. And I remember when I was starting to come out of the deep shitness of that heartbreak, I started feeling like connecting with women again, intimately again. I remember that I had a penis and I was like, oh, I have a sex drive and oh, I have desires. And so I started kind of going out and hooking up and going on dates. I started having fun. And I told myself, I don't want anything more. I don't want anything serious. And it was true. I didn't. But I wasn't entirely honest with myself, nor the woman that I was dating or hooking up with. I didn't want anything serious because I wasn't over my heartbreak and because I was terrified of being hurt again. And so what did I do? I ended up hurting. I hadn't dealt with my shit fully yet. And so I ended up making it other people's. Instead of being totally upfront about where I was at, what I wanted and what I didn't want or wasn't ready for, perhaps more accurately, I did some stringing along, a little kind of protect their feelings type of lying to myself and others bullshit. And because of my experience, that's often what's going on when we're, quote, trying to protect others' feelings, is that we're actually trying to protect our own feelings of discomfort, of letting people down, of hurting people, and all these kind of things. And so I hadn't fully dealt with my own shit. And so it became something I brought into the interactions that I had with others, not just women that I was dating or being intimate with. But if you think about all the satellite kind of interactions and things around that, not being as authentic, not being as energized or as available or as capable in other areas of my life, suppressing over here will have an impact somewhere else. If you think about, if you've got a balloon, you've a push on something here, it has an equal and opposite reaction somewhere else. And at the heart of that was not dealing with my shit made someone else have to deal with it, or have an equal and opposite reaction, had to deal with something themselves. And that is shit. Not dealing with my shit and making it someone else's, or passing some of it on to someone else, that's shit. Now, this is one simple way it happens, but there are countless ways in which men bring our unprocessed shit out into the world. And individuals and partners and families and children and communities and whole cultures of people and countries can pay the price. And I want to be really clear here. My aim, not here, not ever, is to paint men out to be bad. We are fucking wonderful. Oh my God, we have so much to offer ourselves, those around us, and the world. And when we don't deal with our shit, we end up making it someone else's. Our shit often generates our deepest insecurities. And those will generate the behaviors in and around that. And so what we don't make secure ourselves, we will chase security outside of ourselves. I'll repeat that. What we don't make secure within ourselves, we will chase forms of security externally to try and band-aid that which is insecure. I will chase more financial security, missing that will not cure my insecurities. Or other forms of security, validation, likes on fucking social media, approval, riches, whatever it is, we grab for power, status, money, relationships, conquests, possessions, approval. We make our unprocessed shit something others have to deal with as I grab for a semblance of power and security within. And you can see this quite likely in yourself, and you will see it out there in the world. And as Francis Weller, someone who I revere greatly when it comes to this work and being a human, and is most definitely an elder, a fucking wise elder, he says, in the absence of this genuine authority, i.e. grounded internal security, and knowing within, sovereignty over oneself. Because if my insecurities are running my life, I'm not sovereign. Past experiences have led to these insecurities, and they're dictating how I show up in the world. If I'm terrified of what people think of me, that dictates how I show up in the world. Past rejections leading to the avoidance of even putting myself out there, to fear of abandonment, to not showing up, to abandoning myself, all mean I'm not in that place of genuine authority and sovereignty. In the absence, he says, in the absence of genuine authority, right, this grounded internal security, we rely on force, coercion, rank, aggression, and domination. This is not authority or power, but an adolescent strategy to cope with feelings of powerlessness. I'll say that again. In the absence of genuine authority, we rely on force, coercion, rank, aggression, and domination. And so we can expand those, because you might be like, I'm not that dude. Force, coercion, well, being a nice guy, by the way, is coercion. Rank is something that expands out status, power, money, possessions, how I am seen, right? And my level of externally kind of given, I suppose, status. And domination, power over others. It's not authority or power, but an adolescent strategy to cope with the feelings of powerlessness, the feelings of insecurity. I will try and take security from others or via other things. And so, gentlemen, my brothers, men, I am here to remind you, to invite you, myself included, continually, always, to face, to deal with, to own your shit, your internal feelings of powerlessness and insecurity, and not feeling good enough, and not ever feeling like you deserve happiness or belonging or the life that you want, of fear of failure, of rejection, of not being good enough, fear of being abandoned, fear of missing out on life, fear of never truly belonging or being accepted, your feelings of powerlessness and insecurity. Or you will continue to go out into the world and shit it onto all the things you touch. Felt apt to describe it that way. So I say, face your shit. But to quote a couple of gentlemen who I absolutely love and have the highest regard and appreciation for, good men in my corner, Connor Beaton from Man Talks and Trevor Bowen from Man Uncivilized, as Connor says, metabolize your pain. And as Connor says, as Trevor says, acknowledge your pain. Gentlemen, face your shit, own your shit, deal with your shit so that you can move to the other side. Whatever it is for you, start, continue, and build the people around you that can support you in doing that. You get to borrow strength, feedback, accountability, support, being seen and held so that you can develop these things in yourself. That is not the take for power. You don't do this in a vacuum, but we don't steal it from others to try and make up for within. Keep in mind here, there is no perfect. There is no I'm healed, I'm finished, I'm solved. There is a choice to continually be in the process of evolution and change whilst in the game of life, which is a continual process of evolution and change. So my invitation, beyond that invitation, is to sit and reflect, what is the shit that I haven't dealt with from the past, from my adolescent years, from perhaps my early 20s, depending on where you're at, from my recent past that I haven't dealt with, that I've swallowed, dismissed, diminished, pushed away, stuffed down, compressed, that I have essentially put in a backpack that I still drag around, that's feeling heavy. Heavy. All the shit I don't process gets heavy. You do not need to carry that. Others don't have to carry it for you, but we can help you take off the bag and become stronger because of it. There's my invitation. And if you want to seriously get into this work, bring me, my team, the men in my community around you to truly move to the other side of your shit and become who you can be. Not only stop letting your shit impact your life and the life of those around you in the way that it might have, but to truly step into what you're capable of being. The man who you can be. And that is the work that we do in the world of ELA. Find wherever the show notes for this podcast are. Click the link, explore the process of ELA, find out more about it, answer the questions to find out more about you, your suitability, what's going on for you, get to the real fucking heart of what your situation is, what you're experiencing, where you're at, what you want, what might be in the way, so that we can truly see together how we can support you in stepping into being that man. If you listen to this on Spotify, on your phone, dive in, give it a rating, please. We appreciate that massively. Same on iTunes. This has been our show. I trust that you get something from this. Let's have a fucking huge year coming up ahead, depending on when you listen to this. Fuck it, that still works. I appreciate your listenership. I appreciate you sharing this with men in your life that you could think could benefit from it. And I appreciate your feedback, your support. Tell me how this is landing for you. Tell me, show me what you're going to do with this, because that's how we move past our shit. That's been our show. Until next time. You've been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. If this podcast has benefited you, if you enjoyed this, then my request, my invitation is to share this with a man that you think will also benefit from this and enjoy this. Remember, please, wherever you find your podcast, to like us, subscribe to us, click download first, leave us a review. All those things both make sure you get all the updates when they come in, and it supports us in getting this podcast in front of more everyday men that could use it. Until next time, I've been Mike Campbell. Remember to build